On November 11, 1934, a letter arrived at the home of Delia Budd. It described, in careful and deliberate language, what had happened to her daughter Grace. The envelope contained a partial address. Grace Budd was 10 years old when she vanished on June 3, 1928. The family lived in Manhattan, and her father Edward had placed an advertisement in a newspaper seeking employment. A man answered. He gave his name as Frank Howard. He said he was a farmer from Farmingdale, Long Island, and that he needed a hand. He came to the Budd apartment, ate dinner with the family, and spent time with the children. He was gentle. He was patient. Before he left, he asked if Grace might accompany him to a niece's birthday party. Edward and Delia Budd agreed. Grace put on her best dress. She walked out the door holding the man's hand. She was not seen again. The New York Police Department investigated the disappearance for years. Detectives followed hundreds of leads. They interviewed thousands of people. The man who called himself Frank Howard left almost nothing behind: a false name, a false address, a description that fit no one they could locate with certainty. The case grew cold. Edward Budd continued to write letters to the police commissioner asking for news. There was none. For 6 years, the family waited in a particular kind of silence. Then the letter arrived. It ran to several paragraphs. It was unsigned, but not anonymous in any useful sense, because the man who wrote it wanted Delia Budd to know what he had done and wanted to describe it precisely. He wrote that Grace had not suffered long. He wrote other things. The language was specific in the way that only a person present at an event can be specific. Delia Budd could not read. A son read the letter aloud to her. She collapsed. The letter was handed to Detective William F. King, who had worked the Budd case since the beginning and had never stopped. King examined the envelope. On the back flap was an emblem, a small hexagonal logo belonging to the New York Private Chauffeurs Benevolent Association, with a partial address printed beneath it. The address had been crossed out, but not completely. King traced the emblem to the association's headquarters on Lexington Avenue. He asked whether any of their stationery had gone missing. A janitor remembered taking a bundle of envelopes home and leaving them in his room when he moved out. King asked where the janitor had been living. The answer was a rooming house at 200 East 52nd Street. King went to the rooming house. He spoke to the landlady. She confirmed that a man had stayed there recently and had left forwarding information. He was elderly, he was polite, he had given a name. King waited. On December 13, 1934, the man returned to collect a check. King was present. The man's name was Albert Fish. He was 65 years old, small and white-haired, with pale eyes and unremarkable hands. He did not resist. At the station, Fish confessed. He described where Grace Budd's remains could be found in Westchester County, near a place called Wisteria Cottage in Greenburgh. Detectives went to the location. They found what remained of her in the woods nearby. The bones confirmed what the letter had described in terms of age and size. A medical examination of Fish himself, conducted after his arrest, produced an X-ray. The image showed 29 needles embedded in his pelvic region. Some had been there long enough to have partially dissolved. The radiologist who reviewed the image required a moment before speaking. The psychiatric evaluations that followed were extensive. Multiple psychiatrists examined Fish over the course of his trial. Several concluded that he was mentally ill. Several concluded that he was legally sane. The jury deliberated and returned a verdict of guilty with no recommendation for mercy. The judge sentenced him to death. Fish's attorney later recalled that Fish expressed no fear of the electric chair. He expressed something closer to anticipation. He told his attorney that the execution would be, in his words, the supreme thrill, the only one he hadn't tried. The investigation into Fish's full history stalled almost immediately after the trial. He claimed during interrogations to have harmed children in states across the country over a period of decades. Investigators were unable to confirm the specific number. Some cases matched details he provided. Others could not be verified. The FBI reviewed his movements against unsolved cases from multiple states, but the records were incomplete and the era predated centralized tracking of such crimes. The precise scope of what Albert Fish did between the late 1800s and his arrest in 1934 was never established. Files were closed. Cases remained open without resolution. His execution was carried out at Sing Sing prison on January 16, 1936. Witnesses present noted that the first charge of electricity did not function correctly on the initial application. Some accounts attributed this to the needles embedded in his body. The second application completed the procedure. He was 65 years old. In subsequent decades, researchers reviewing cold case files from the 1910s and 1920s periodically found details that resembled methods and patterns Fish had described in his confessions. None of these were formally attributed to him. The records were insufficient. The witnesses were dead. The letter Fish sent to Delia Budd is preserved in institutional archives. It is occasionally referenced in academic literature on criminal psychology. It was written by hand, in ink, on plain paper, and mailed to a woman who could not read it herself. What no one has satisfactorily answered is this: after 6 years of silence, why did he write it at all?